Welcome to our webinar on the Global Investment Competitiveness Report in partnership with Islamic Development Bank, World Bank, and World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. I am Ismail Ershahin. I am the Deputy Executive Director of WAIPA. I hope you all are safe and in good health, and I hope you're going to enjoy today's sessions. Actually, well, we have just combined forces with Islamic Development Bank and the World Bank, of course, to involve more WAIPA and OIC member IPAs into discussions of the key findings of the GICR 2019 and 2020, to engage high-ranking participants in a discussion on the current pressing issues for their agencies, and also to disseminate the findings of this precious report to a larger audience. So what does this Global Investment Competitiveness Report has? It provides, first of all, actionable recommendations, which is, of course, the key in the times of uncertainty, and it helps to rebuild investor confidence. It focuses on the role of foreign direct investment in alleviating impact of the COVID-19 crisis. It highlights FDI's contribution to providing a critical source of external finance, creating jobs, lifting people out of poverty, and raising productivity. It presents a very precious survey, which is conducted among 2,400 business executives representing multinational corporations in 10 large developing economies. And also the report articulates priorities for investment promotion agencies and other stakeholders. I do know that when you look at the banner, you see like 4 movie stars. They are really stars in their areas. We have 4 excellent speakers today. We have Said Hussein Kadri. He is the acting director of the Country Strategy and Cooperation Department at the ISDB. We have Boštjan Skalar, who is the executive director of WAIPA. We will have Armando Hilbron, as well as Peter Kusek from World Bank Group. And finally, hopefully, we will have around 20 minutes for questions and answer sessions. I just want to share with you the numbers about the audience. I just learned from my friends, my colleagues, that we have around 247 registrations and 76 countries are represented amongst them. And 70%, more than 70% of them are from IPAs or from government bodies, and the rest from international organizations and investors. So some just quick guidelines. Please do use the chat box function. This is can be used for your questions, for your comments, or your observations. I mean, I encourage as well our presenters, our speakers, also to answer your questions instantly, but we will again have the chance to have the question and answer sessions. Just in case we don't have enough time for that, make sure that you keep your questions, please, a bit short and to the point and clear enough for us. And of course, the webinar is being recorded. Will be available at WAIPA's website. So will be the presentations of the esteemed participants of the day. So without making it too long, I would like to give the floor to Said Hussein Kadri, who's the acting director of the Country Strategy and Cooperation Department at the ISDB. His presentation is going to be about the impact of COVID-19 on investment and investment promotion in ISDB member countries. Said, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome again.
Thank you very much, Ismail, for this lovely introduction. We're delighted from the Islamic Development Bank to be not only participating, but organizing this very essential webinar. So I, without any further ado, have a short presentation to provide to set the stage up in terms of what is the current context and where are we all coming in from.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Said. Thank you very much. We are also delighted to work with you and to be able to do this webinar with your very strong support.
No, that's always a pleasure to do anything with WAIPA and the World Bank as well. So I'm really looking forward to Peter and Armando and everybody else's presentations, and Boštjan's as well. So just to set the stage in terms of where we are all coming from, and what are we going to be talking about for the rest of the 90 minutes. This COVID-19 pandemic has triggered unprecedented global health and economic crisis. We've looked at absolute changing of the entire global supply chains. We've witnessed a major declining in the FDI in the first half of 2020, already by some estimates down by 49%. Although these challenges have been tremendous and have been significant, but there have been some inclusive responses made from different governments and non-governmental agencies as such as well. So we'd like to probably look at some of the good practices as well in terms of cash flow supports, relaxed tax measures, refocusing on regular investments and all that stuff as well. We'll capture some of those areas. Another area that we will look at are the fact that there are some challenges that were existing previous to the crisis and are persistent and are likely to exacerbate towards the course of the post-pandemic period as well. What would they be? And in the end, I'd like to touch upon what do they all mean to the investment promotion agencies in terms of how do they become more decisive, supportive, reflective, and more agile in terms of their responses as such. So just a quick count of some statistics. We've seen that the pandemic has reached about 213 countries, infecting 42.6 million people, unfortunately having about 1.2 million mortalities as well. Now, apart from the human dimension and health condition, it has had a significant amount of economic impact as well in terms of growth. So there are forecasts to suggest that not just a 5.2% reduction, but one of the greatest reductions in recessions that globally we would be witnessing per capita wise in terms of income declines and pushing millions of people back into poverty. And that would be a major impediment in terms of our achievement of the SDGs as well. So apart from the economic growth impact that we're witnessing, we're also witnessing a significant reduction in terms of trade. So some estimates would range about from 13 to 32% reductions over there in this year alone. And lastly, this all has an effect on the investment promotion dimensions and investment side of things in terms of FDI. And you'll hear a lot more of it from Peter's presentation. So I'll leave some of the more exciting elements over there. But some statistics are given over here in terms of FDI projected to be decreased, how it is going to go on and go forth. And lastly, it again begs the whole point to repeat that this is a health and human crisis. We're witnessing a second wave of lockdowns and closure of businesses and travel restrictions. So after a certain period of some ease, we're witnessing these things to come in. So this will probably curb in a lot of economic activity and business activities and restrict the labor supply, productions and movements as such. So that probably is going to have another knock-on effect because we haven't been able to control the situation as such. Our presentation from the Islamic Development Bank will focus upon the OIC member countries. So OIC member countries, just as a refresher, are 57 member countries across 4 continents, Asia, Africa, South America, and Europe. And the estimates are that about 25% of the global population are made up of IDB and OIC member countries. However, in terms of the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, it's very difficult to gauge what has been the exact way because the data has been a little bit lagging behind. But from the current estimates, we're looking at 4.6 million confirmed cases and about 111,000 mortality. Particularly, cases are most significant in Iran, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Turkey, and other places as such. GDP contractions have been going on, but not as significant as some of the other non-IDB member countries, but the intra-OIC exports have also been reducing. But what we are really concerned by are the significant deterioration in the current account balance and the fiscal sustainability. So there are projections which are a little bit more rosier than expected, which would be a bit of a surprise because the global and regional supply chains have been rebounding a little bit better in some of the member countries as opposed to others. So there is a variance that we're going to be talking about. So minus 3.4% as compared to about 6% to the countries which are a little bit more plugged into the GBCs as such. So as I mentioned, that there is a variance. What had happened in the IDB OIC member countries is that we were flatlining, investments were flatlining around about $100 billion a year for the past couple of years. And we expect some reductions over there. However, some regions such as Asia have been performing significantly better compared to Africa and MENA. In terms of private investments, we've witnessed that the countries which were a lot more export-oriented industries they've suffered significantly by weakened demand abroad, actually, where initially it started off with China and then the rest of the countries and even regional countries as well. So the shortage of inputs of manpower, market-oriented firms, especially SMEs, have been accounting for the losses. And likewise in the public investments. The IPAs in the IDB member countries have had some peculiar issues as such. They've been a renewed focus on them in terms of refocusing for the related emergencies, crises, redefining existing activities, and then in terms of like how they have responded have also been significantly different as well. I'll touch upon that a little bit very quickly. So there are some good stories that have been coming in. There have been some good responses coming in from the national and the global level as such. We've witnessed unprecedented rapid spending in the public health and safety measures in terms of access to diagnostics and treatment, reinforcing of capacities of healthcare systems, improving surveillance and cases, and supporting the frontline officials and staff. Also significantly, the countries that have fared better have had a more proactive fiscal and monetary policy in terms of supporting vulnerable segments, having social safety nets, monetary policies which were a little bit more low cost oriented and having a little bit more liquidity into the systems have tended to do better in terms of treasury bond buybacks as well as such. Another set of good practices that has been coming up is that in terms of scaling up in terms of basic food, agriculture, social safety nets, direct cash transfers, the countries and the communities in the regions who have been able to do that successfully have been able to weather this a little bit much better. And there has been some form of regional cooperation and integration in terms of these things, and international investment policies have been coming in from G20 to support resilience in global supply chains and strengthen international investments. Now, in terms of the way forward that we are proposing, they center around 4 key basic principles: improving the business environment, upgrading transport infrastructure and facilities, promoting intra-OIC and inter-OIC trade and investments, and identifying the right regional and global value chains. In terms of improving the business environment, we have to look at how the rankings have been doing, how countries have been comparing to others in terms of member countries. Sub-regions have been offering a remarkable diversity over there. So it does vary from places to places. But one of the things that has remained the same is the fact that the importance of infrastructure, especially transport infrastructure, multimodal corridors of transport and trade infrastructure is going to be key in terms of how do we come out of these areas as such. There are missed opportunities that have been in the past, but we need to make sure that in the post-pandemic world, they don't remain missed opportunities, but they actually are something that we latch onto. So intra-OIC trade remained low at 20% in the past, and now has been increasing. And identifying the actual global and regional supply chains would be essential as such. So there are 2 other areas in terms of that we wanted to talk about is in terms of reviving domestic investments. We're talking about extending necessary credit flows, improving the transport infrastructure, as I mentioned before, reducing inefficiencies in government spending, supporting SMEs and agricultural sector. We've witnessed that how if you do that properly, how it helps, and promoting private investments in public sector activities and having a sound fiscal and monetary policy as such. The other area, which is sort of going to be extremely important in terms of domestic way of getting these things done properly, is to reprioritize capital spending, prioritizing the right projects which will be coming up with and having an effect. The other hand in hand it goes is with the exploiting the digital transformation. We've witnessed a webinar like this happening all digitally, and that's one of the areas where the IPAs need to capitalize upon to support them, arrange meetings, attend these investments and conferences, adopt technology at all levels in terms of emergency and economic resilience, and extend reliable social safety net programs, subsidies, direct cash transfers, all of it using technological advancement that we're witnessing right now, one of the key areas as such. Now, that's all well and good, and some of these recommendations are a little bit more medium to long-term in nature. What do we need to do immediately to sort of get out of this withering crisis? It's to retain investment through aftercare and advice services, and you'll probably hear a little bit more from other presenters. Scoping up opportunities for PPP, particularly in the health sector, facilitating post-pandemic trade and investment opportunities and getting those things done properly, providing comprehensive information to clients, customers, and investors. And it's very important to give an accurate up-to-date diagnostic of these areas as such, and identify needs from global supply chain changes as such. A little bit about the Islamic Development Bank, for those of you who are not familiar. As I mentioned, it caters to 57 member countries all across the world. We have 11 regional hubs, accounting for about 23% of the world's population. We've recently established them in Turkey, Senegal, Morocco, Indonesia, Nigeria, Egypt, Malaysia, UAE, and Bangladesh. And then we have a couple of ones coming up in Uganda and Suriname. Some of the areas that we do operate in is in science, technology, innovation, and scholarship programs, private sector development in terms of trade finance and promotion of intra-trade and fund and asset management. But fundamentally, we are a bread and butter institution of development project financing, whether it is lending or other ways of doing it in these things in 57 member countries. But we also have specialist assistance and grant programs in other 130 plus member countries. Capacity development is an essential area for us to come in, whether it is technical human capacity development of people and institutions. And promotion of Islamic finance is one of our raison d'etre. So in terms of Islamic economics, finance, research, and training, development of the Islamic financial sector and services industry. And lastly, investment promotion and investment insurance is one of the strongest arms of the IDB group. We have a dedicated unit for these things as such. So what has been the Islamic Development Bank's response to the COVID-19 crisis? First and foremost, we started off with a strategic preparedness and response package, SPRP, a $2.3 billion package for 2020 only, exclusively for our member countries, about $2.3 billion of new approvals. And we've broken this down at 3 levels in terms of short-term response projects, medium-term response projects, and longer-term restart member country partnership strategies that we're looking at. So in terms of emergency responses, we focused on health systems, food systems, and social safety net systems. Private sector stimulus we've been providing for lines of finance in terms of the medium term. And in the longer term, we're looking at how to support revival of industries by kickstarting and catalyzing public and private investments in member countries through what we call as the MCPS, member country partnership strategies as such. We've also identified some innovative new tools and products offerings. So we're mobilizing external resources and scaling up trade finance capacity of IDB Group. This is through some new innovative mechanisms such as the COVID-19 guarantee facilities that we've come up with. And lastly, we're also looking at promoting investments and capacity development of IPAs. It is organization of large-scale investment conferences and programs and forums very soon. As a recap, to the IPAs, our last parting message would be to react, refocus, rebuild, and renew your services, your focus areas, your AI as such. And at the end of it, what matters most is how you see yourself. And if you are confident and if you do feel like that, that's what matters, and that's what we'll be able to do so. So with that, I'll hand over back to Ismail, and thank you very much for listening and patiently waiting for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Saeed, for this very comprehensive and excellent presentation and for the precious suggestions for IPA colleagues. I'm going to slowly hand over to Boštjan Skalar, the CEO of World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. Welcome, Boštjan.
Thank you, Ismail. Up to now, I really enjoyed the webinar, our presentation. I would like to first welcome all the participants, and first of all, of course, would like to thank to our partners, Islamic Development Bank and the World Bank Group, to be working hand in hand. As you know, WAIPA is a global institution of the investment promotion agencies, and is always happy we are always happy if we can facilitate the cooperation among different stakeholders, different partners. Everyone by him or herself or one institution can't help to the global community, but if we join forces, and this is one of the SDGs, number 17, the partnerships, this matters actually. And I'm particularly happy when, for example, 2 banks join forces together with WAIPA. Especially we have it, let's say, both of the banks are having also the development role in the global level. So of course, OIC focus, Islamic Development Bank focus more on the OIC countries, which is 57 members, as Syed said, but the global picture as well is followed by a World Bank. And why I believe it's today's webinar extremely precious is because we all know that IPAs, the main clients of IPAs are investors. And this Global Competitiveness Report shows especially what the investors, and that's why there were so many top-level senior management people from the global corporations interviewed to show what they expect from IPAs and how, especially now in these severe times of COVID, IPAs can respond to mitigate this risk of pandemic, and as well how they can be prepared for the future of their operations. So mostly investment promotion, investment attraction, aftercare, and the whole, of course, investment cycle. Let me just briefly mention the, let's say, some numbers that partly Syed already said, but were shared in the investment trends monitor that was just published 2 days ago from UNCTAD, which shows that indeed the predictions were the right ones, and the first half of 2020 shows 49% drop of FDI. And what is the most, I would say, critical information is that even there is a drop of 37% of the greenfield announced projects, which normally shows the trend of the FDI. Even mergers and acquisitions, minus 15%, and crossover financial deals, 25%. So even that kind of, let's say, more portfolio investments are decreasing. And it's shown that 75% drop is mostly in developed economies, and in developing they were a bit more resilient, only 16% drop. But looks like that the predictions of the whole 2020 will be 30 to 40% drop. We had, as WAIPA and of course IPAs, responded to this kind of severe situation and cases. We did, for example, the complete survey on the COVID and the responses of IPAs and everything. I will not go through it. I would rather mention that we also surveyed the potential threat for the IPAs, that because of their governments are having enormously a lot of expenses with the subventions to try to help to local economies. So the budget cut for IPAs is predicted to be even around 56%, and many of them were claiming can be loss of authority, over 20%, and some of them even was predicting, but luckily we didn't see this black scenario that might be shut down. And how we responded and how IPAs responded. For example, we immediately created a platform, COVID platform, where any of the partners, as well banks and our consultative committee members, could share their views. IPAs could share their views, how they are responding to the crisis, what are the challenges, how they can help to each other, how they are mitigating this risk for especially to the existing investors. And they all said very clearly, and we did a lot of interviews with the heads of IPAs in our initiative to try to see what they are doing and share with the whole FDI community how is the response of the IPAs. We saw very clearly that aftercare plays an extremely important role to mitigate the negative impact of the COVID to existing investors. And we all know that 50–60% of the satisfied existing investors in the country can re-expand, can plan the new investments. And we all know that the totally new investments are on hold currently because of the uncertainty of the situation. And we see the new wave is coming, which is even, I would say, even stronger than it was in, let's say, March, April. So obviously the new reality is coming, the new normal is coming. So that now we need to build back better. And this is how, for example, everyone responded. We gave some recommendations to IPAs to revisit their strategies, to see what sectors they are prioritizing. We all know that there were some sectors which were terribly negatively impacted by the COVID, especially tourism, hotels, like a travel industry. And here I would like to mention that, of course, we can use digital tools, we can make digital marketing, we can make even digital location visits and everything, but this would never replace the real meetings. This can be a preparation for the future. And for example, our colleagues from the Consultative Committee from International Chamber of Commerce recently conveyed a very strong message and proposed agenda how to make the travels back safe, that the people can start slowly to travel again, to be able to visit the potential locations where they would like to place the investments in the future. And I guess this is a good initiative that we should all follow and try to see how this can be restructured in a manner that we can safely operate in the future and again, as let's say investment promotion agencies, serve to our investors. So what was main recommendations that came from our survey that we did particularly for COVID, and as well it reflected in our global joint survey with the World Bank that we did like a state of investment promotion agencies. And I can clearly say that, of course, revisiting the investment promotion strategies, revisiting the organizational structure. Maybe there is a need to put a bit more attention to aftercare, to retention, expansion, as I said before. And we should definitely, and this is, I guess, what the report that colleagues from the World Bank will present showed. So how especially investors see the future. Because we always say to our dear colleagues from IPAs that we need to speak the business language. So we need to speak the language, how the investors see, let's say, the situation and what they expect from us. Probably there would be a need to be a bit more lean organizations. There would be a need to maybe target sector reprioritization. As I said, maybe there will be more technology-based sectors, so IT, artificial intelligence, even e-commerce, maybe more even portfolio investments, which is possible in these difficult times, of course, via the technologies. With all these new sectors, we believe that there will be a need for new talents because there will be a need for the people, the sector specialists who will be able to address the questions and challenges of the investors. Most possibly the KPIs will change up to some certain level and the SDGs will come in the forefront, especially meaning that the countries will focus more on the sustainable investments. And let me end off saying that we all partners, banks, other institutions, let's say global institutions, intergovernmental institutions, has a very important role to play, which is to help and assist IPAs, EDOs, whatever you call the institutions that are promoting their respective countries as the potential investment locations, to help them, to make capacity buildings, to assist them with technical assistance, to show them the way forward, to help them create maybe new aftercare strategy, create a new, let's say, global, let's say, future strategy, how to respond to the challenges that are still around us because of the COVID. And maybe more target advisory, so helping by particular functions of the IPAs, particular mandates to change, to maybe revisit the KPIs, the activities that they are doing. And I believe that this kind of cooperation between us as, let's say, umbrella organization of the IPAs and especially development banks and other global leaders and opinion makers and opinion leaders will definitely help to IPAs and as well to governments to understand that investment is now more than ever important to, let's say, build back better and to attract new investments and to make sustainable investments and to help to our communities. So I guess if we all work hand in hand, as well, governments will understand that there is even need not to decrease the budget, but even increase the budget with, of course, a bit of reprioritization of the function of IPAs, but to definitely serve to existing and potential future investors to, again, help with investments to our communities, help with bringing the cash flows, bringing the new, let's say, fresh blood in the technologies, and so on. So with this, I would like again to thank to all of you participating and being active, although there are difficult times, and we are here with all our partners, that WAIPA has enormously a lot of partners, and we are here to assist you and to help you in any kind of things that you need. So thank you so much. Over to you, Ismail.
Thank you very much, Boštjan, for your speech. Actually, it was encouraging for all IPAs. As you just said, WAIPA is there always to assist member IPAs as well as other IPAs in any time. And this is a great, let's say, sign of that as well with the participation of ISDB and World Bank. We are organizing this event. And now we are proceeding with the next speaker. We will have Armando Heilbron. Armando is a real experience. I mean, each time I listen to him, I learn another thing. And I would like to thank you specifically for joining us today, Armando. And we look forward to your speech. We will also have, I'm going to hand over to both of you at once. And we will also have the star of today. We will have Peter Kusek, who is the managing author of the report. What I was speaking with Armando and Peter recently as well, that the report is very, very detailed, and it's around 240 pages. You may wish to go through it, of course, but we will have very much compressed version of that today, and we will have the chance to listen this report directly from Peter, and we will have the chance to ask our questions directly to him. Thank you very much, gentlemen, again for joining us. Armando, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ismail, Syed, Boštjan, participants. Good day, everybody. It's great to hear new points of view and updates from all of you. Very important points that we're making today. And I would just like to make a few additional points to bring as an appetizer to the main course of today and identify myself as an IPA practitioner, which I was at some point in time. I did identifying with all of you around the world in my also new role of investment promotion workstream leader for the World Bank Group. Number one, those of us working with FDI have, like never before, experienced and realized how interconnected everything is. We operate at the intersection of very complex international, national, subnational, and sectoral spheres. Many factors determine FDI inflows, as we have heard, many of which are out of our control completely. And we have learned this time again that despite all our good intentions and efforts doing the right thing, FDI can fall and divestments can happen. So no doubt these are very or extremely uncertain times for all of us and also for investors. Number two, this underlines the importance of better understanding complexities that are involved in making investment decisions. And research like the one we'll share today with you helps in this, helps in understanding how investors feel and behave. This is essential, as Boston was saying, especially in these very uncertain times. It helps understand the geopolitics that matter a lot in this environment. It helps understand that investment policy is affecting FDI entry, protection, incentives, services, and also the respective support institutions for investment matter as well. And how your location compares to the others on their radar, the radar of investors, matters even more. So all these into consideration. The third point is that we also know how investors value IPAs, and they do value IPAs. So go ahead and tell your bosses and your supporters. They appreciate IPAs, especially when providing certain services. Stealing a little bit from Peter's presentation, investors mostly value IPA services advocating on their behalf to improve the business environment, their ecosystem, which is essential for their survival, for their thriving as investors, and then later expanding and diversifying. Investors also value IPA services related to hands-on assistance with their grievances, with their issues during the different stages of the life cycle of investment, and especially during these very difficult times. The problem is that some IPAs still don't provide these services. The third point, as a conclusion to the appetizer, let me stress that IPA's increasingly important role in advocacy cannot be underlined more than before. We have identified several roles of IPAs, but advocacy is not one of those that come in at first. And so we have heard so much. It's very essential, very important that we improve the business conditions, the ecosystem in which investors operate to reduce uncertainty. And that would help with retention, later expansion, and then attraction of new investment into your locations. This is why WAIPA and the World Bank Group are collaborating and launching very soon the IPA advocacy competition. So keep tuned and hear it from Bastian, from ourselves. With this, let me hand it over to Peter, who will provide the overview of the report that he led, and also provide a few updates based on more recent surveys that he's also undergoing, and the ideas on rebuilding investor confidence in times of uncertainty. Thank you very much. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you, colleagues. It's a pleasure to present our work to such a distinguished virtual audience this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are joining from in the world. We heard from Ismail that we have nearly 250 registered participants from 76 countries. So again, thank you very much for joining us for this seminar. Let me share my PowerPoint presentation so that we can get started. close this. And I will minimize this. Great. So the Global Investment Competitiveness Report is World Bank's flagship report series on foreign direct investment. We recently launched the report's second edition, whose key findings I'll present today. Let's get started. Let's begin with a broader context. Even before the COVID-19 outbreak, global FDI was in decline. This decline was mostly concentrated in high-income countries, where inflows of FDI fell by nearly 60% in the recent years. While FDI to developing countries was more resilient, it nonetheless fell to its lowest levels in decades relative to GDP. As shown in the graphs, compared with the mid-2000s, when FDI reached nearly 4% of GDP in developing countries, that share fell to under 2% in the recent years. This decline has been driven by a variety of business and policy-related trends. They include changing forms of international production, such as adoption of digital technologies resulting in increasingly asset-light forms of production, but also falling rates of return on FDI, trade policy uncertainty, and rising protectionism. Now enter COVID-19. The coronavirus pandemic is an unprecedented source of investor risk, depressing business confidence to new historic lows. The projected fall in global FDI in 2020 is more than 40%. In fact, the recent UNCTAD report that Boštjan's already referred to shows that in the first half of 2020, FDI to developed economies fell by a staggering 75%. The decline in the developing world was comparatively lower, but still a 28% fall in Africa, a 31% decline in South Asia, and a 21% drop in Southeast Asia. From a sectoral perspective, declines in FDI have been particularly steep in the hotel, tourism, extractives, and consumer products. In contrast, software, IT services, communications, renewable energy, and business services have been relatively more resilient sectors, although still experiencing mostly declines. And while these data come from companies' media announcements in the press in terms of their investment intentions, we also wanted to ask companies directly how they were faring in the turbulent economic times. To do that, we have now been conducting a quarterly foreign investor pulse survey of affiliates of multinational corporations in developing countries. The third round of this quarterly survey is currently underway, but let's look at the latest results. They show that the COVID-19 pandemic is adversely affecting nearly all surveyed investors through both demand and supply side shocks. 4 in 5 businesses have seen declines in revenues and profits, 2/3 have decreased investment, and over half have had to reduce employment. Now, some good news, at least the way it was perceived by the investors when we conducted the last round of the survey during the summer. Looking ahead, multinational enterprises expect that the pandemic-induced shocks are likely to ease as companies adjust to new market conditions and as some economies gradually reopen. The surveyed businesses also report an improved outlook for supply chain reliability, possible signaling greater adaptation and resilience. Now, these have been some troubling statistics that we've been looking at. And they are particularly concerning because FDI has always been a key building block for economic growth of developing countries. It's been providing the largest source of external finance, surpassing remittances, official development assistance, and portfolio investment flows in those countries. In fact, our report provides new evidence that FDI has the potential to alleviate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, but not just by providing a critical source of external capital, but also by continuing to create more and better paid jobs, to lift people out of poverty, and to boost productivity. Analysis of unique firm-level data matched with household data from Ethiopia, Vietnam, and Turkey shows that FDI firms create new jobs and pay higher wages than domestic firms. Workers in sectors and regions with higher foreign firm presence are generally more likely to be formally employed and receive higher wages. We show that FDI allowed more than 350,000 individuals to enter formal manufacturing employment in Vietnam over the last decade, and at least 40,000 in Turkey and in Ethiopia during the study period. FDI also raised average manufacturing wages by 32% in Ethiopia, 12% in Vietnam, 8% in Turkey. Consequently, the FDI-induced wage increases helped reduce poverty in all three countries. FDI contributions to economic growth are seemingly more obvious when it comes to greenfield FDI. Greenfield investment adds new elements to the economy, new facilities, new jobs, new production capacity. In contrast, brownfield FDI, that is acquisitions of domestic firms by foreign investors, transforms existing production. Most of the previous evidence on brownfield FDI has come from high-income countries and has focused on economic growth, overlooking development outcomes at the level of firms, the jobs they create, or the wages they pay. To help fill this gap, our report brings a focus on acquired firms in developing countries. This is particularly pertinent as brownfield investment has more than doubled as a share of FDI in developing countries over the past decade. Our report analyzes a unique set of industrial census data from 6 developing countries: China, Côte d'Ivoire, Indonesia, Moldova, Serbia, and Vietnam. The results show that brownfield FDI firms perform better than local firms on some of the key dimensions that matter for development, including export orientation, product diversification, asset accumulation, labor productivity, and employment. Results show that firms acquired by MNEs not only perform better than the average domestic firm at the time of the acquisition, but also improve their performance after acquisition faster than local firms. For example, over the first 5 years of a firm's operation, a brownfield affiliate is 70 to 100% more likely to export than a domestic firm. Wages in foreign takeovers at the end of the first 5 years of operation are 40 to 50% higher than in domestic firms. Furthermore, contrary to the conventional belief about the potential job-destroying effects of foreign M&As, employment in newly acquired firms tends to grow faster in most countries than employment in domestic firms with similar characteristics. Specifically, 2 years after acquisition, the average employment in brownfield affiliates expands by approximately 4%, compared with 1.5% in similar local firms. The experience of the 6 countries analyzed in this study therefore suggests that foreign acquisitions can be a helpful complement to greenfield FDI in developing countries seeking to leverage foreign investment for development. Having said this, we must also reflect on the possible adverse effects that FDI can have on inequality. Our report shows that although the FDI-induced wage increases help improve the incomes of the bottom 40% of the populations in the countries that we studied, hence positively contributing to increases in shared prosperity, which is one of World Bank's strategic goals, the effects across the entire income distributions differed significantly across countries. For example, in Ethiopia, the benefits of FDI were more concentrated in the bottom 40%. And in Turkey, however, the greatest average weight experience from FDI resulted in increases in wage inequality. As a result, when comparing regions and sectors with higher FDI activity against those with no FDI, we see that foreign investment can increase inequality by disproportionately benefiting better educated and higher skilled workers. Those labor force participants who lack these characteristics may be left behind. And since such workers tend to be more concentrated in the less economically advanced parts of their countries, FDI can exacerbate geographic disparities within economies. These dynamics emphasize the importance of countries' labor market and education policies as critical mitigating factors. Key policies including, number one, strengthening the absorptive capacity of domestic firms and workers, for example, through programs that foster FDI supplier linkages and employment training. Number two, supporting vulnerable communities, such as lower skilled workers, youth, and women with active jobs information provision and skills certifications. And number three, establishing programs to stimulate labor mobility within countries. A key feature of the report is also a survey of 2,400 global business executives from 10 large middle-income countries, including China, India, Mexico, and other leading emerging markets. The survey was conducted in late 2019 and showed that at that time, significant trade and investment policy uncertainty was negatively affecting companies' investment decisions. 2/3 of investors reported that policy uncertainty due to protectionism and economic nationalism in trade and investment was either important or critically important in their investment decisions. As you will recall, during those pre-COVID times in late 2019, the specter of a trade war between the US and China was one of the dominant themes frequently making the headlines of the international business press. We highlight this finding now because we're again seeing, at least in some markets, re-emergence of protectionist policies against trade and FDI in the name of national and economic security. The survey results show this is likely to have a further dampening effect on FDI in an environment where global FDI is already expected to decline dramatically. Another key finding from the survey is that government policies and actions matter for business decision-making. The top three factors influencing investment decisions are political stability, macroeconomic stability, and the quality of the country's legal and regulatory environments. Nearly 9 in 10 businesses consider these factors to be important or critically important. Moreover, these factors rank ahead of considerations such as low tax rates, low labor and input costs, or access to resource endowments. Moreover, easing restrictions related to investment approvals and licensing is particularly important. And firms which encounter obstacles are more likely to reduce their investments. These are overall important results based on robust evidence. The surveyed companies collectively represent around $40 billion in total investment, and they directly employ more than 1 million workers. And this is just based on conservative estimates. The key role of government actions, policies, and regulations, in particular those that reduce regulatory risk and increase policy predictability, is further highlighted by the report's new global database of regulatory risk. It analyzes the content of domestic and international laws and regulations for investment. The database shows that investor confidence and FDI flows increase with higher regulatory transparency, stronger investment protection, and better access to effective recourse, the three pillars of the database. The effect of regulatory risk on FDI is sizable and comparable in magnitude to the investment enhancing effects of trade openness in the same regression models. In fact, in some of the models, the effect of regulatory risk on FDI exceeds that of trade openness, showing that a 1-point reduction in regulatory risk increases the likelihood of an investor entering or expanding in a host country by 0.5 to 2 percentage points. Our findings from the investor survey, which thematically complement our analysis based on the risk database, show that complex administrative procedures, excessive bureaucratic discretion, and non-transparent policymaking are further barriers for nearly 2/3 of investors. To enhance investor confidence and reduce regulatory risk, governments need to remain committed to creating an open and predictable environment for FDI. Given that sources of policy uncertainty that erode investor confidence are both international and domestic, solutions at both levels are needed. Governments can reduce risks for investors by improving transparency and predictability in policymaking and implementation, reducing room for bureaucratic discretion, aligning domestic rules with international legal frameworks, and facilitating access to a wide range of dispute settlement options, including mechanisms to prevent disputes by early detection and resolution of investor grievances. Investment promotion agencies, IPAs, can play a key role in reducing investor risk, helping governments rebuild investor confidence and boosting countries' investment competitiveness. While IPAs have proliferated over the past 2 decades, success stories are still scarce, especially in the developing world. Our surveys show that many IPAs remain unfocused, with too many mandates, too many target sectors, and too many functions. The current literature, combined with surveys of IPAs and operational experience of the World Bank, suggests that IPAs can have greater positive impact if they sharpen their strategic alignment and focus, adopt a coherent institutional framework, and strengthen the delivery of investor services. In contrast, IPAs should not overestimate the role of investment incentives in increasing allocations' overall investment competitiveness. The business survey results also reveal the importance investors place on IPAs' efforts to improve the business environment, to provide assistance with setting up companies' operations, and with resolving issues and disputes. These services by IPAs rank much higher in the minds and eyes of investors than location marketing or providing pre-investment information and assistance. In the current COVID-19 crisis, many IPAs are rightly shifting their principal focus from new FDI attraction to retention of existing foreign investors, as well as preservation of supply chains connecting foreign firms and their domestic suppliers. Taking care of existing investors is critical, as reinvested earnings by these companies account for a majority of FDI in many developing economies. Through IPA's responses to market signals and investors' needs, governments have an opportunity to minimize the risk exposure of multinationals and their associated supply chain linkages. Overall, countries should assess which sectors and value chains have proven resilient during the COVID-19 crisis. This will involve evaluating the risk exposure, value proposition, and competitiveness factors of individual sectors and value chains. In addition, governments should identify emerging competitive sectors in their countries that may arise from the possible reorganization of global value chains and FDI landscapes. Should new investment patterns emerge, they will likely require new priorities in investment policy and promotion reforms. These will entail realigning the investment incentive regimes to the new national development priorities likely to emerge after COVID-19, such as job creation. Reforms may also be needed to limit or phase out crisis-related investment screening and approval restrictions. And lastly, measures to increase local firms' resilience and to strengthen supplier development programs will be needed to enhance FDI linkages to the local economies. In conclusion, and this is my last slide, what can governments do, on the one hand, to leverage FDI to strengthen the resilience of their economies and help absorb future shocks, and on the other hand, to turn the current COVID-19 crisis into new opportunities for FDI? Our report highlights three overarching priorities of, number one, avoiding protectionist policies, number two, seizing new opportunities from changing FDI and supply chain trends, and number three, fostering global cooperation. Governments should resist protectionist policies, which further exacerbates disruptions to global value chains and amplify the already elevated uncertainty. Instead, to attract additional investment, countries should continue to ease FDI entry and operational restrictions. In fact, some countries are already using this crisis as an opportunity to open new sectors of their economies to foreign investment. Enhanced regional cooperation can also be a critical element in the removal of barriers to intra-regional trade and investment. Regional integration helps countries overcome divisions that impede the flow of goods, services, capital, people, and information. These divisions are a constraint to economic growth, especially in developing countries. Experience shows that deepened regional integration allows countries to improve market efficiency, accelerate reform processes in a coordinated and predictable manner, and foster multi-regional cooperation. Bilateral and regional trade and investment agreements also help enhance policy certainty by committing national governments to specific policy priorities and by fostering open and conducive trade and investment environments. Countries can seize new opportunities as a result of shifting trade and investment patterns and policies. For example, in the face of higher tariffs resulting from the 2019 trade war between China and the US, importers have already sought new sourcing locations in the global marketplace. Trade diversion may in turn cause a shift in FDI as firms adjust global supply chains and their centers of production. With the COVID-19 crisis, the push to diversify supply chains will likely be further intensified. Yet, no consensus has emerged so far on how the global FDI and GVC landscape will look after COVID-19. Some scholars hold the view that no major changes will take place and that adjustments will concentrate in health-related industries, as well as economic rationale for GVCs remaining the same. Others believe that COVID-19 has become a wake-up call for a new balance between risk and reward for GVCs, as pandemics, natural disasters, and other crises expose the world to increased risks. Regardless of which outcome prevails, multinational firms, as the main architects of GVCs, are likely to adjust production networks to improve their resilience and robustness in response to COVID-19. Policymakers should reflect on these possible shifts in investment preferences and let business realities guide their policy response. And lastly, tackling the complex challenges presented by the current global environment will require global cooperation. The pandemic has illustrated the shared public health and economic vulnerabilities that countries face. It has also highlighted the critical importance of exchanging data, sharing information on good practices, and strengthening collaboration. The magnitude and scale of the current crisis require policymakers to deploy their full arsenal of policy tools to improve business confidence and boost countries' investment competitiveness. During the global financial crisis, an unprecedented, synchronized, and coordinated policy response was critical to containing the crisis. Once again, the times are testing policymakers. They must rise to the occasion by acting quickly, decisively, and collaboratively. Thank you. This concludes my presentation of the GICR report. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about this work and access some of the new global databases that have been developed to enable the analysis in this report. Thank you. And let me turn it over to the moderators.
Thank you so much, Peter. It can be one of my most comfortable moderations because everybody was so punctual that we just finalized right on time. And I would like to thank you very much, Peter, as well, for this excellent presentation. It cannot be that better compressed, actually. It was so useful for all of us, actually. And this very detailed and comprehensive report was, in a nutshell, thanks to you, directly from the author, managing author of the report. We had the pleasure to listen directly from you. And I would like to slowly switch to the Q&A session. If you allow me, we have many questions. I hope the time will allow us to finalize all of them, to cover all of them on time. My first question is going to go to Boštjan Skalar as my boss. And Boštjan, one of our participants is asking, can WAIPA provide technical assistance to IPAs in the development of their capacities and their strategies during this period of COVID-19? Would you a little bit elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I was seeing actually this question in the question Q&A section. Actually, this is why WAIPA is here. WAIPA is here to help to IPAs. Of course, the biggest then the most important thing is the capacity buildings. And as you, of course, I will not go through all what we are doing, but definitely we are, of course, having it our standard, let's say, capacity building programs, which we are developing over the years. One of them is called FDI Excellence Series, where we, of course, go through the whole investment cycle. Then we are doing, of course, tailor-made programs for particular IPAs. We can work, for example, of development of the new strategy, development on the, let's say, just part of the, let's say, investment cycle, maybe aftercare activities. We've been providing, of course, exchange of information. So we are doing anything possible that you might need. And of course, inviting always prominent speakers. For example, one of the, let's say, capacity building are also webinars that we are currently doing. And of course, the very high level speakers are sharing their, let's say, views and experiences. But as I said, feel free to contact us. We have different, let's say, sources of how we can help you. And our team is ready to assist in any kind of request. And we will find the common solution how to proceed and how to make the best out of it to help you proceed with whatever you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boštjan. I just would like to add one small thing. As you all know, our main focus as WAIPA, or as all IPAs, is investors, actually. Investors are there as our final client. Therefore, to all our efforts, all the efforts of the IPAs are to help them better, to create better investment climate, better investment environment. Therefore, WAIPA is joining forces with all the institutions in this area to be able to learn how better we can help investors. So without making it too long, I'm going to switch to the next question. Actually, it's about regional cooperation. I was just thinking who would take this question. Maybe Said, would you mind to take over this question? How do you envisage regional cooperation among IPAs in investment promotion to optimize resources? Is it possible or could be hindered by competition or investors? What's your opinion?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ismail. I think it's a terrific question. Regional cooperation and regional integration, these are concepts that we have witnessed that initially during the crises, we had a phase where all the countries and everybody else were doing what was best for them and what was immediately apparent to them. It was a matter of responding immediately. But the countries and the set of regions where they banded together, whether it was particularly ASEAN or in parts of Africa as well, WIMO and elsewhere as such, we witnessed that they were able to withstand a lot of these challenges a lot better. So IPAs need to sort of also replicate the cooperation dimension as such as well. because the more you align your policies, the more you align your problems and how you're responding to them, the better it is. Even if you are identifying some unique regional and global value chains that is unique for you, that's perfectly fine. You can have your advantage and you can play with that. But in terms of an understanding, in terms of getting the investment forums, investment conferences, investment areas as such done, it's better to do it in a cooperation manner as well. Another benefit that comes with cooperation amongst IPAs is the fact that of reverse linkage. You hear from best practices. This is an area where nobody has had expertise in prior before as well, right? So you need to learn from experiences. You need to share your experiences. That will build upon new areas and new dimension of working together as such. So that's what I would say in terms of regional cooperation and in terms of integration with the IPAs and everything else. Over to you, Ismail.
Thank you very much, Syed. It was very comprehensive and very precious suggestions actually for maybe OIC member IPAs as well as all the other IPAs very actively collaborating in their respective regions. I will switch to the next question slowly. Maybe Armando, you are maybe one of the most experienced persons in the area, and you've been working with the IPA since very long time. And therefore, I do believe that your opinion on that would be very much appreciated by the participants as well. This is about large multinational corporations as well. They are considered as the main source of FDI globally, as you know. They are well resourced and have access to information and services through legal advisors and service providers. How can, in your opinion, IPAs add value to those large investors? Or alternatively, should IPAs focus on SME investors where they could provide more value? I mean, this has been a question mark all the time. I think you would be one of the most important persons to answer that question. Over to you, please.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you very much, Ismail, and participants for making such a question. No doubt that SMEs have a lot more limitations in terms of how to access information, how to explore destinations for investment. So agencies could have a portion of their services geared or targeted to the SMEs in strategic sectors. So remember, one of the points that we are making is that IPAs are trying to do too many things and they have no focus, really. They should be having a more sharpened focus on particular segments of their of the FDI pizza or pie. And so SMEs, if it makes sense for your location, could be one of those focus areas because of what we're saying. Yes, they don't really have that information as the large multinationals. Now, the second thing I'm going to say, and I talk from lots of experience, most of my clients were huge multinationals: Intel, Procter & Gamble, Ospeda, Baxter, the medical companies. And that's because the fact that they have money doesn't mean that they don't have blind spots, that they perhaps are missing out on a particular opportunity in one of your countries. So it is your role to identify where you have a compelling value proposition to offer and knock the doors of the companies, because most likely the consulting companies or themselves, they don't have that fully covered. They are not looking at the radar and then having you there. Most likely you're missing on the radar. So it is your role to put your location on their radar. Cover that blind spot.
Thank you very much, Armando, for this answer. I think it's going to be giving a lot of insights to many of our IPAs. They should be focused. They should be knowing what they're doing. Actually, they should be targeting their investors, and they should know what they are targeting as well, of course. And the next question, maybe Peter, you would be the best person to answer this question. You have been working with the companies while preparing this report. You've been conducting surveys, and your publications are being, let's say, publicized through many very world-renowned institutions and magazines. And therefore, I do believe that this might have something to do with the report as well. It's clear that the developing countries will be affected from two fronts. This is very interesting as well, actually. Developed economies are impacted, of course, which reduces the demand for goods produced by the developing countries. And they are also, of course, impacted by reduced FDI towards their countries. How can developing countries still survive?
Thank you, Ismail. Absolutely, this is one of the most critical economic questions, macroeconomic questions for our countries. The World Bank and the IMF have just concluded their annual meetings. Each October, governors of central banks, finance ministers from all around the world, from all countries of the world, usually gather in Washington for these strategic discussions on core challenges facing the global economy. This year, of course, the meetings were conducted virtually and digitally. But one of the core messages from both the president of the World Bank as well as the managing director of the IMF is the time for debt relief, for debt flexibility, so that developing countries have the fiscal space to aid both their businesses and their citizens. This is not the time for austerity, which has been traditionally advocated by the IMF. This is the time to take advantage of low interest rates. This is the time for developing countries who have access to international capital markets to deploy their full arsenal of tools and work in collaboration with their creditors to work out a space where they can deploy their public finances to the benefits of their companies and to the benefits of the businesses. And while FDI and trade is down, we are seeing, in fact, one silver lining in terms of access to cross-border capital flows, and that is remittances. Curiously, the remittances over the last 6 months are up. I think across the world, the picture is such that those workers who have had access to earnings in more prosperous markets are feeling the pain of their families back home and are remitting even more than they have been in the past to help ease the burden. So, and of course, as we know, these remittances not only support families and households, but also many of the small businesses, SMEs, micro businesses that these persons run. So for me, this has been one of the rare, but nonetheless very powerful positive lessons emerging from the crisis in terms of access to capital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to switch to the next question, actually, and I'm going to ask this to the floor. Any of you can pick the question. To what extent digital foreign direct investment can be viewed as an opportunity to recover? And is there any risk that this will exacerbate inequality?
I'd be happy to share what our work tells us in this space. Number one, all surveys that we continue to conduct of both local companies as well as of foreign companies show that those that have embraced digital technologies are faring better, are more resilient, are able to access more suppliers, more customers, more business partners. So that's just as a basis. But the key point is to also differentiate between digital companies in the technology and ICT space and companies in all other sectors that are embracing digital technologies through e-commerce, e-payments, communication with their clients, customers, or simply in terms of how they organize their supply chains and value chains globally, including offshoring some of the back office functions to developing countries. So again, I think it's important to differentiate between the big tech, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters, and I think there's a lot of discussion, especially in the US and Europe, how governments will regulate big tech and the market power and concentration they have amassed, and differentiate that from the businesses that are digitalizing because they've been nimble and flexible and have opportunistically embraced the opportunities that digital creates. And the last point is we've been seeing the democratization of access to opportunities that technologies allow, be it through the proliferation of smartphones, the penetration of networks and technologies, even to the rural areas. And again, you would know, many of you would know this better than me. I sit in Washington where half the time I don't have internet access because our infrastructure is so poor. Yet we see that in a lot of rural areas across the world, citizens are able to enjoy some of the fruits that digital technologies are able to provide. So the democratization revolution, if you will, that networks and access to IT have facilitated, I think will also come to the fore in terms of cross-border business, investment, and trade opportunities.
Thank you very much, Peter.
If I may.
Yes, Armando, please.
Just to add, this is highlighting the role of IPAs to advocate on behalf of the improvement of the ecosystem. And look, it's not just about regulations or policies, it's also about the other aspects that investors need. And this particular context is to access to skills and to have this democratization effect. IPAs need to make sure that the digital services are available and that reach out to even the remote corners of the country so that those people could also benefit from this wave of change in business models. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for those who are ready. And that's where the agency could play a role advocating for those. On advocating, again, let's make sure I'm not just saying policy advocacy. This is the always, where agencies would advocate for a policy change or a regulation. We're talking that investors do care about regulations, do care about certainty, but they do care about the rest of the things. Skills is number one in this new digital age. Skills. If you have the skills, investors will not look at you. You also need suppliers, good suppliers, certified suppliers. So you need to work on those as well. Infrastructure, utilities, those go beyond regulations. I guess that's why we're putting emphasis on this advocacy competition. Some of the participants wanted to us to expand on that, and I'll actually let Bostian talk about it because it's a joint effort.
So over to you, Bostian.
Yeah, actually, the main idea is, of course, to help and assist the IPAs and, of course, governments to prepare their markets to be ready, actually, for all these challenges that Armando was just talking. And, of course, the idea why we will start this kind of cooperation is to encourage the governments and IPAs to work on this improvement of the business environment and the regulations and the infrastructure and talent, making the new talents, let's say, providing certain educational systems. And we know that there are good cases, for example, where Armando comes from, but he was modest, didn't say, in Costa Rica, they pay enormously a lot of attention to develop the educational system, but of course, with the focus on what sectors they would like to prioritize, and then what kind of investors they would like to invite to their country. And then, of course, all these things we would like IPAs to work on, and then, of course, prepare the best possible environment in the future, and of course, advocate towards their governments what is needed for this. And this is what we would like to award as well in the future. And this, we believe, will bring better FDI, let's say, community and performance in the future.
When we speak about advocacy, I like saying that all the time. When you promote or you facilitate, you help only one investor. When you advocate, you help all the economy, actually, to all the sector, is it? Therefore, it's very crucial part of the business that IPAs are doing. This is why I'm always saying that investment promotion agencies are not just there to promote, but also to facilitate, but more importantly, to provide advocacy services. This is so crucial. Thank you very much.
And there's a difference between aftercare and advocacy.
Exactly.
So we can expand later if there's interest of plunging into more of the investment promotion chapter of the report, but that would be for later.
I think people are interested for later parts of our collaboration, of our tripartite collaboration, maybe I would say. Said, is there going to be any additional trainings or events?
Absolutely. In fact, actually, one of the benefits of working from home or working in a digital environment has been that this entire proliferation of webinars, capacity development programs, in online digital conferences and seminars and things like that, plethora of it. So first, all of us took some time, March and April, to adjust to the new realities, and June, July, was when we started to adjust our programs and plans and all that stuff. But you're really witnessing the fruits of it September, October, November, December. There's just a plethora of these events and activities. So with regards to the Islamic Development Bank, WAIPA, World Bank, and all the other different IPAs and organizations as well, there are tremendous amount of things which are lined up. I briefly mentioned about the fact that from the Islamic Development Bank, we have investment conferences, actual investment conferences, where countries and the Islamic Development Bank and other MDBs would be able to come up with projects, and we'd be looking for cross-financing and investors into that. We're talking about capacity development programs also with other organizations such as the World Free Zones, WAIPA, and all sorts of other places where we're looking at both in-house and digital working groups and programs. And then, of course, we have individual IPA capacity development initiatives and efforts. So one of the areas we're working with the World Bank is on Niger, actually, and a few other countries which are also in the pipeline as such as well. We're looking at entire restructuring of the IPAs, and it's going to be completely interesting how we try to do that in a post-pandemic environment as such as well. So you're having 3 levels of activities, and I don't think anybody is going to get any time off from these anytime soon. So Ismail, however busy we keep each other, we'll always have lots of different things to do. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Saeed. Gentlemen, it's such a pleasure actually to be sharing the same screen this time. Unfortunately, we cannot share the floor. You know, we share the screen, but it's a privilege actually to work with the 2 esteemed institutions like Islamic Development Bank and World Bank. And I would like to thank you on behalf of WAIPA and all of our members for joining us today. And we look forward to working together. And we do achieve tough days. We are experiencing tough times, but we just can't sit and wait. We just can collaborate more, and we can provide more and as much as we can to our members and to IPAs. There's always somebody in need. Therefore, I do think that your contributions are so precious and so invaluable for all of our members. I do want to thank you again, and I am unfortunately have to close the session, and I hope we will have more chance to meet and more chance to collaborate, more chance to provide this knowledge, know-how to our members, to FDI community as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And thank to all the attendees, to all the participants to join us. And again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Take good care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.